Start. Oh, no. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Radha Govinda Deva ki, Grantara Śhrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading today from the Śhrīmad-Bhāgavatam, the second canto, chapter 1, entitled The First Step in God Realization. And today we're taking a look at text number 11. Etanir vidyamananam Ichatam akutobhayam Yoginam nripanirnitam Hare namanukirtanam Etan nirvidyamananam Ichatam akutobhayam Yoginam nripanirnitam Hare namanukirtanam Etan nirvidyamananam Ichatam akutobhayam Yoginam nripanirnitam Hare namanukirtanam Etan nirvidyamananam Ichatam akutobhayam
Yoginam nripanirnitam
Hare namanukirtanam Etan nirvidyamananam Ichatam akutobhayam Yoginam nripanirnitam Hare namanukirtanam Etan nirvidyamananam Ichatam akutobhayam Yoginam nripanirnitam Etat, it is Nirvidyamananam, of those who are completely free from all material desires. Ichatam, of those who are desirous of all sorts of material enjoyment. Akuta bhayam, free from all doubts and fear. Yoginam, of all who are self-satisfied. Nripa, O King. Nirnitam, decided truth. Hare, of the Lord Shri Krishna. Nama, holy name. Anu, after someone. Always. Kirtanam, chanting. Translation. O King, constant chanting of the holy name of the Lord, after the ways of the great authorities, is the doubtless and fearless way of success for all, including those who are free from all material desires, those who are desirous of all material enjoyment, and also those who are self-satisfied by dint of transcendental knowledge. Prabhupada. In the previous verse, the great necessity for attaining attachment to Mukunda has been accredited. There are different types of persons who desire to attain success in different types of pursuits. Generally, the persons are materialists who desire to enjoy the fullest extent of material gratification. Next to them are the Transcendentalists, who have attained perfect knowledge about the nature of material enjoyment and thus are aloof from such an illusory way of life. More or less, they are satisfied in themselves by self-realization. Above them are devotees of the Lord, who neither aspire to enjoy the material world, nor desire to get out of it. They are after the satisfaction of the Lord Sri Krishna. In other words, the devotees of the Lord do not want anything on their personal account. If the Lord desires, the devotees can accept all sorts of material facilities. And if the Lord does not desire this, the devotees can leave aside all sorts of facilities, even up to the limit of salvation. Nor are they self-satisfied, because they want the satisfaction of the Lord only. In this verse, Sri Shukadev Goswami recommends the transcendental chanting of the holy name of the Lord. By offenseless chanting and hearing of the holy name of the Lord, one becomes acquainted with the transcendental form of the Lord, and then with the attributes of the Lord, and then with the transcendental nature of his pastimes, etc. Here it is mentioned that one should constantly chant the holy name of the Lord after hearing it from authorities. This means that hearing from the authorities is the first essential. Hearing of the holy name gradually promotes one to the stage of hearing about his form, about his attributes, his pastimes, and so on. And thus the necessity of chanting his glories develops successively. This process is recommended not only for the successful execution of devotional service, but also even for those who are materially attached. According to Sri Sukadev Goswami, this way of attaining success is an established fact, concluded not only by him, but also by all other previous acharyas. Therefore there is no need of further evidence. The process is recommended not only for the progressive students in different departments of ideological success, but also for those who are already successful in their achievement as fruitive workers, as philosophers, or as devotees of the Lord. Sri Jiva Goswami instructs that chanting of the holy name of the Lord should be loudly done, and it should be performed offenselessly as well, as recommended in the Padma Purana. One can deliver himself from the effects of all sins by surrendering himself unto the Lord. One can deliver himself from all offenses at the feet of the Lord by taking shelter of his holy name. But one cannot protect himself if one commits an offense at the feet of the holy name of the Lord. Such offenses are mentioned in the Padma Purana as being 10 in number. The first offense is to vilify the great devotees who have preached about the glories of the Lord. The second offense is to see the holy names of the Lord in terms of worldly distinction. The Lord is the proprietor of all the universes, and therefore he may be known in different places by different names, but that does not in any way qualify the fullness of the Lord. Any nomenclature which is meant for the Supreme Lord is as holy as the others, because they are all meant for the Lord. Such holy names are as powerful as the Lord, and there is no bar for anyone in any part of the creation to chant and glorify the Lord by the particular name of the Lord as it is locally understood. They are all auspicious, and one should not distinguish such names of the Lord as material commodities. The third offense is to neglect the orders of the authorized acharya or spiritual masters. The fourth offense is to vilify the scriptures or Vedic knowledge. The fifth offense is to define the holy name of the Lord in terms of one's mundane calculation. The holy name of the Lord is identical with the Lord himself, and one should understand the holy name of the Lord to be non-different from him. The sixth offense is to interpret the holy name. The Lord is not imaginary, nor is his holy name. There are persons of the poor fund of knowledge who think the Lord to be an imagination of the worshipper, and therefore think his holy name to be imaginary. Such a chanter of the name of the Lord cannot achieve the desired success in the matter of chanting the holy name. The seventh offense is to commit sins intentionally on the strength of the holy name. In the scriptures it is said that one can be liberated from the effects of all sinful actions simply by chanting the holy name of the Lord. One who takes advantage of this transcendental method and continues to commit sins on the expectation of neutralizing the effect of sins by chanting the holy name of the Lord is the greatest offender at the feet of the holy name. Such an offender cannot purify himself by any recommended method of purification. In other words, one may be a sinful man before chanting the holy name of the Lord, but after taking shelter in the holy name of the Lord and becoming immune, one should strictly restrain himself from committing sinful acts with the hope that his method of chanting the holy name will give him protection. The eighth offense is to consider the holy name of the Lord and his chanting method to be equal to some material auspicious activity. There are various kinds of good works for material benefits, but the holy name and his chanting are not mere auspicious holy services. Undoubtedly, the holy name is holy service, but it should never be utilized for such purposes. Since the holy name and the Lord are of one and the same identity, One should not try to bring the holy name into the service of mankind. The idea is that the Supreme Lord is the supreme enjoyer. He is no one's servant or order supplier. Similarly, since the holy name of the Lord is identical with the Lord, one should not try to utilize the holy name for one's personal service. The ninth offense is to instruct those who are not interested in chanting the holy name of the Lord about the transcendental nature of the holy name. If such instruction is imparted to an unwilling audience, the act is considered to be an offense at the holy name, at the feet of the holy name. The 10th offense is to become uninterested in the holy name of the Lord, even after hearing of the transcendental nature of the holy name. The effect of chanting the holy name of the Lord is perceived by the chanter as liberation from the conception of false egoism. False egoism is exhibited by thinking oneself to be the enjoyer of the world and thinking everything in the world to be made for the enjoyment of oneself only. The whole materialistic world is moving under such false egoism of I and mine, but the factual effect of chanting the holy name is to become free from such misconceptions. Om Jnanaatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmritam Yana Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahaguna Ragunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahaguna Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshware Vrishabhanu Sudadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. O King, constant chanting of the holy name of the Lord, after the ways of the great authorities, is a doubtless and fearless way of successful all, including those who are free from all material desires, those who are desirous of all material enjoyment, and also those who are self-satisfied by dint of transcendental knowledge. So it is interesting how the Bhagavatam, on more than one occasion, Sukadeva Goswami ultimately makes this distinction between these three different kinds of people. Those who are desiring material enjoyment, those who are self-satisfied, and then those who are the devotees, who are somehow different than the others. So generally one would think that there's two kinds of people. There's materialistic people, interested in material enjoyment, and then the spiritual people, who are not. But somehow we see that now there's this third category. So the devotee is somehow different from both the materialist and from those who are seeking self-satisfaction, the classic spiritualist. Now what exactly is that difference? It's important to understand because one will chant the holy name of the Lord according to one's desire, and then one will get a specific result. So to see what exactly the desire is of the devotee that is different than the other two, it helps, because then one will get a quicker result. And we have to chant these rounds in any case, so we might as well get a nice result while we do it. So firstly, the materialist is very simple, the easiest one to understand. The individual that is simply seeking material enjoyment. And important to understand that materialist, when we hear materialist, we immediately think people who like cars and women and alcohol, and all the heavy things that sort of come up when you think materialist. But materialist is not, you see, the conception of materialist goes into all the three modes. Simply means people who are thinking that their faith is that if I can somehow organize the material energy in some way, then I will be happy. And therefore they are also disturbed when the material energy is somehow not organized according to their liking. And then they become unhappy. So depending then on the piety, on one's piety, one will have faith in certain specific kinds of material arrangements. But it is all in the same category. So those who are ichatam, they are desirous of all sorts of material enjoyment. Now that is an uncomfortable position, because the material energy is always changing, and it is made in such a way, it is guaranteed that as the material energy goes through its various movements, it is guaranteed that at a certain point, actually quite regularly, it will just go in such a way that won't be favorable for your enjoyment. And there's nothing anyone can do about it. It is made like that by God. So therefore, but most people don't understand this, and they think that somehow it's just now that it is like this. Oof, it's very uncomfortable, but they're looking forward to that day when everything will be perfect. So obviously at a certain point of maturation, everyone understands that this will never happen. So, and then one graduates to the next level, where one starts to understand, well, the reason why it is so uncomfortable to be a materialist is that this dissatisfaction that we experience, it burns the heart, it burns the mind. Dissatisfaction is the root cause of all material anxiety. It is the root cause of all unhappiness. And we see there from the Bhagavad Gita how oftentimes Krishna says that satisfaction, prasade, that's what prasadam literally means. Prasade sarvadukkanam, hanir asyo pajayate, prasana chaitaso yasu buddhir avyavitishtate. If one can simply become satisfied, then hanir asyo pajayate, then all misery is destroyed. That is how one destroys all actual suffering. Because desire, material desire, or unhappiness, that is the suffering. So if there is something that you don't like, then one is afflicted, because one is always thinking about it, and it is causing so much stress and strain. And if one is afraid of losing that which you already have, then you also, that is also suffering. So all these various forms of dissatisfaction, that is what makes the mind unstable. That's what disturbs the consciousness. And then, depending then on what mode of nature one's material desires is, that the dissatisfaction will differ. For example, if you get involved in heavy sense gratification, like something like heroin or that, then the dissatisfaction that comes from that is very intense. Even so intense that you can die. Fascinating, isn't it? How people who get attached to these heavy drugs, if they just leave it, the dissatisfaction, the withdrawal that comes from that can kill them. It is so intense, the pain of not getting it. So most of us luckily are not heroin addicts, but we all have our various forms of addictions, isn't it, that we have. And then we become very unhappy. So then obviously the next step is one graduates to becoming, to seeing that, well, it is very difficult, it will cost me a lot of money. What the Mahabharata says, one has to understand that there is not enough money, grains, animals, meaning property, and women, or members of the opposite sex, in this one universe, to satisfy even one person. So therefore, one should just go about with a peaceful mind, meaning that even if you get everything, then it will still not work. So therefore, immediately when one has that understanding, then one enters the path of transcendence, where you see that, well, it will be impossible for me to become satisfied by making adjustments to my external environment. So now let me start making adjustments to my internal environment. Let me see if I can make adjustments in my heart, or in my consciousness, in my expectations from the world, And in that way I can become satisfied, even though whatever else is happening around me. Then one becomes, as Prabhupada says here, one becomes self-satisfied, which is an interesting word. It means that's what it means. Your satisfaction comes from yourself. So it doesn't really come from your external environment. You have that ability to adjust. And that we adjust by, obviously, firstly, cutting our attachment as far as possible from any sense gratification. So more and more you withdraw your consciousness from external pleasure. So then it doesn't really matter if you have it or if you don't. And then one becomes peaceful. And that has to be then set by some form of spiritual practice. And that's what people generally see when we think about the archetypical yogi. Recently I saw this very interesting, well, it's also not so easy. I saw this movie, or this clip of Father Lazarus. I don't know if you've seen Father Lazarus. He was an Australian man who was a philosophy professor, but somehow he became a Coptic Christian. So the Coptic Christians is a very austere sect of Christians that are in Egypt. So he went to Egypt and he became a Coptic ascetic. So living in the desert, like the early Christians, many of them would live in the deserts and practice their spiritual life there. And it was very interesting to see this man, because people would then travel to him, and he really lived there in the desert, quite isolated. And people would travel there to him, people seeking some form of spiritual guidance. And it was interesting because many Christian people would go, because modern Christianity is obviously, there's not so much renunciation. People don't know so much about it. It's not really, they don't have so many role models or people who practice it. So therefore, many modern people who are still somewhat religious, they're also burning in the fire of dissatisfaction. And there's no one really to teach them how to become a little bit more renounced so that they can become a little peaceful. So many people would go to Father Lazarus and see him. And they would go, and it was very interesting because he said, he was speaking to one gentleman, and he said when he came there, he said, you have to understand that you might think now that this place looks very peaceful. It looks like a very peaceful place. In the desert, there's no distraction. And I mean, he had a nice little house. They carved these houses out of the stone. So there's the mountains, these thick mountains, and then they build these inside. They carve out these nice little cabins, which are nice and cool. And he says that you might think that this is a nice, peaceful place. But he says, but if you come here, you have to understand it is a battle. There's a war. Because one will be tempted by the devil. Obviously the concept of the devil, meaning that all your material desires will come out when you sit there. All the various reasons for why you are dissatisfied, they will come, and they will pull you out of this desert. They will pull you away back into the world. And it's interesting to see. One can then appreciate that someone who has, if you live there for 20, 30 years without any kind of sense gratification, then you must definitely have some power to be able to do that. It must be genuine. Otherwise, you will go your mind will make you go crazy. But then the devotee, that's interesting. How is the devotee then different? Because the devotee follows to a certain extent this same pattern. The devotee also loses faith in sense gratification. And then he starts to invest, he starts to divest from the external pleasure. And but the devotee is very different, because whereas the Transcendentalists, or this kind of intermediary Transcendentalist, he is investing in self-satisfaction. The devotee, he invests in the satisfaction of Krishna, which looks the same in one sense, because both of them are not investing in the external energy. But the devotee's investment is a little different. He is interested in Krishna's pleasure, in Krishna's satisfaction. And therefore the devotees, as Prabhupada says here, they do not want anything on their personal account. The devotee, the real devotee, so this is obviously not, this is not easy to fake, but the real devotee is not even concerned. He is not concerned with his own satisfaction or not. It is not really even an issue for him. He is interested for the satisfaction of Krishna. And therefore, even though one could say even though it's possible that you maybe have some of these severe ascetics who can then live in the middle of the desert, and maybe we won't, isn't it? Will we be able to do that? Probably not. I think we'd go crazy. There in the middle of the desert, imagine that. No, you can't really have dairy, so no ghee, or maybe some ghee, but no fresh milk every day, whatever. So many various things can be. No salads. You all have to eat these, dried food. So many things you can't have. So even we are devotees. Will we be able to live like that? Probably not. But that doesn't really matter so much. Why is that? Because God, as Prabhupada says here, the devotees, they can accept anything. They accept whatever Krishna sends them. They can accept any kind of material facility. And if the Lord does not desire this, the devotee can leave aside all sorts of facilities. So the devotee is not concerned with somehow now making his external environment more and more austere. That's not what he cares about. What the devotee does, which is more difficult than what even that some of these transcendentalists can do, is that the devotee, he shifts his attention towards what will give Krishna pleasure. What is it that Krishna desires of me? And that is the trick. So he burns with the desire of Krishna. But that also is not something artificial, you see. The goal is initially that we try to perform Krishna's desire by hearing what it is that Krishna wants. So the spiritual master comes, the Prabhupada comes, and we read now that God is a person. And then we read about, what happens is we start reading about what Krishna desires. And then we see, for example, what is Krishna's desire? Well, Krishna desires everyone to be happy. Krishna desires also people to be not just happy but ecstatic and love him. And therefore we see that in this movement especially, we are following the desires of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is interested in giving his holy name to everyone, and in some or other reaching out to other people. But one can really only, in the beginning we do this, because when we do it we feel a great sense of relief. We feel relieved from our own material desire, and therefore it feels quite nice when we engage in this process. But at a certain point, for those who are also very much developed and mature, what happens is that that becomes their desire. You see, their desire, they do not engage in devotional service merely for the sake of becoming relieved from their own misery, but they really start to feel bad for other people. They really start to want to have other people be happy. So that compassion is such an amazing thing. And we see that even in some of these very impersonalist traditions, they would make such a big thing of compassion, because it's such a powerful emotion. It is so, because that's the thing that completely knocks you out of thinking about yourself. See, to become concerned with your own happiness is very natural, it's very easy. And it's like, it happens again and again. We just again and again shift to that perspective. But if one can somehow then be concerned with the happiness of others, immediately one is relieved from this affliction of always being so much focused on ourselves, which then leads to so much dissatisfaction. So therefore the devotee, but he does it very quickly, does it very easily. He is simply thinking about what is Krishna's desire, what is the desire of my spiritual master, and then immediately that consciousness shift is there, that change in the mind is there, that relieves him from so much of the anxiety that comes when one is invested in the external energy. So, what an amazing ability, and therefore that is what distinguishes the devotee. Because even one can be very spiritual and become very advanced in terms of very much detached from the external energy, but still one's attention and one's goal is one's own happiness, one's own satisfaction, one's own peace. That is still one's driving motivational force. But and then the devotee is then even the beginning devotee, he is more advanced than the most austere impersonalist, because the devotee from the first day he has this ability to somehow says, well, I will do this for Krishna. I will do this because this is what will make Krishna happy. And by that act, he is actually performing something much more greater, much more difficult, because that requires some qualities that are very unique, and it is these qualities that ultimately attract Krishna. So therefore one has to also, very interesting to see that is a distinction. So one can never distinguish the advancement of a devotee simply based on whether he is living in a desert or whether he is living in very uncomfortable external circumstances. Because one never really knows to what extent a devotee is feeling the desires of Krishna very pertinently. And the devotee then is interesting because he accepts. I remember once there was two swamis. They were, my one friend told me the story, he was the servant of one swami. And then they were, just the two swamis were sitting in a car, and the servant was also there, and they were having a discussion. And then the one swami said, he was saying how much he was inspired by the preaching of this other Maharaj in America. So this Maharaj had recently started to do a lot of outreach again in America, and things were going very big. And then he said he was so inspired by seeing that, because he, for a long time, he had, even though he was also American, he had invested a lot of energy in other parts of the world, and he sort of wasn't really involved in America again. And then by seeing all these things, he says that the desire to again, come to America and reach out in America, it has somehow been kindled in his heart. You see, being so inspired to seeing that. And then the other Maharaj turned to him and he said, "Let it burn." He says, "Yes, let it burn. Let that desire that you are now feeling, to somehow feel it I must also now, let that desire burn, make that desire more intense." And it's very interesting. So that is the devotee. The devotee does not shy away from desire or from the uncomfortability that comes when one now has a desire to do something. The devotee just lets it burn. So even though that desire causes so much, can actually cause dissatisfaction, it looks like it. One has a desire and now one is impelled to act on it. If you have an idea by which you can serve Krishna, then that idea bothers the mind, isn't it? It sits there, you have this idea that you're thinking, wow, if I could do this would be very great. But the problem is to do it will be difficult. It will be difficult. It means I have to somehow find the time, I have to somehow find the energy, I have to somehow, if it's a desire that is involving other people, then we all know how difficult that is, because then you have to somehow work with other people in order to be able to do it. So the devotee, so the impersonalist, he doesn't like these things, because again, that even that desire to serve Krishna, it will now disrupt his peace, it will disrupt his self-satisfaction. But the devotee understands, no, this is the way out. This is what will ultimately even get me there. Is that if I just embrace this desire of Krishna, and I somehow do it, and I somehow really invest in making it happen, and therefore the devotee is unique. And so he even accepts the apparent dissatisfaction of desires that are favorable for Krishna consciousness, and this desire, this dissatisfaction then pushes him to do so many things. And that is the unique vision of our Sampradaya. And we see that even then, that is what distinguishes someone like Srila Prabhupada from many of his godbrothers. We see that when Prabhupada, the one interesting thing with Prabhupada was that he was always very, one could say, apparently dissatisfied with whatever thing was given to him. He always wanted to make it better. He was never just said, okay, this is okay, I've done it now, this is nice. Which is something that one generally sees is very much part of, we see that's also an interesting distinction between Asian cultures, Eastern cultures and Western cultures. Somehow in the West, because they're so passionate, people they can't just be satisfied, they can't be peaceful. God, they're always trying to make things bigger, better, more powerful, more serious, just going wild. And then we see in general in the Orient, that is one of the distinctions, that the people are just peaceful, you would hear about when the British came to India the first time, and then they became sort of then, as they took over a big influence of British society, then you would see aristocratic Indian people, they would have a back room, and in that room they had furniture. So they had furniture, some nice things, and they would keep it there. And whenever some British people would come visit them, they would bring the furniture out in the front room, set it there, put it up, and then the British would come and they would sit with it at the table and be with them. And then when the British friends or people left, then they would put the furniture back and they would again sit on the floor and be peaceful. So very interesting that the difference in culture. But we saw Prabhupada was interesting because, for example, when he got the magazine, one of his godbrothers' magazine, then Prabhupada immediately, this godbrother gave him, he became the editor of this magazine. It was just one of those little simple religious newsletters that you see, 1 or 2 or 3 pages, black and white, just stapled by some temple brahmacharis, put it together, just have maybe 100 copies, and that's it. And it gets sponsored by some member of the congregation. They've been sponsoring it for the last 20 years, and it's just somehow it's been like that for 20 years, and everything is fine. It is what it is, and they just kept it like that. And then somehow Prabhupada inherited this newsletter, and then he had so many plans. And then he wrote a letter to his godbrother saying that he wants to make this magazine like Time or Newsweek. I don't know, maybe Newsweek, but he says specifically Time or Life magazine. And then he made all these plans how to get it printed in color. He wanted to get it printed in color. He got someone who was willing to sponsor paper. He got all these things lined up. He wanted to increase the copies to 500, to 1,000, to 10,000, and he had listed all these amazing plans that he had. And then what was the response? His godbrother wrote him back and said, well, I think that maybe your plans are a little too ambitious. Maybe you should go somewhere else. Why is that? Because you could see that Prabhupada would now cause a disturbance. It would cause a whole disruption in the peaceful operation of that magazine, which has been going on like it was for a long time. And he was thinking, why would I do this? Why would I now disrupt my whole peaceful situation for the sake of this Prabhupada? He says, no, this Prabhupada, he will cause problems. Rather let him go somewhere else. And it's very interesting, that distinction then, seeing how it was this vision of Prabhupada to always try to invest and to make it better. And why? Because it was for Krishna. That vision of saying this is for Krishna's pleasure. So therefore naturally one would want to see it improve and become better. Because even in the spiritual reality, we see that is the nature of, the dynamic nature of the spiritual world, is that therefore there's always action going on. People always continually investing in their service for Krishna. And then while we are within this world, it is by somehow connecting with that mentality. That is what will really save us. That is really what will take us forward. And even if our desires do not realize, even if we are not able to create a magazine that is as good as Newsweek or as good as Time, it doesn't matter. It is the attempt. And it's not just the attempt, but it is the willingness to embrace that desire. Because that desire then starts to take over the heart, and that becomes the meditation. And then we see what will happen then is then one will be able to chant properly. That is the interesting thing. Because the chanting of the holy name, it depends on, as we said, the materialist can chant because it will allow them to obtain their material desires. And that is a fact. If you chant Hare Krishna sincerely, even if you have enough pious desires, the holy name can fulfill all desires. So whatever you want, then you can get that from chanting. Those who are transcendentalists, they can also see. You can chant many, many rounds, and then your mind will become peaceful, you will become detached. And many people chant like that. You take a vow to chant 32 rounds a day or 64 rounds a day, then you see how much easier it is to detach yourself from sense gratification. But then the devotee, he chants, and what he wants is he wants to see what is it that Krishna wants from me. That is what he is seeing. But the devotee is also willing, he is able to see it. Because the problem is that what happens if Krishna wants something that I don't want? Therefore most people, when they chant, it's difficult to really see what Krishna wants, because we're afraid of what Krishna wants. So therefore we chant, but maybe we don't really want to know what he wants, because maybe he will want something that I don't want. So therefore, best to just not want anything. So we see that, but then those who are chanting with a desire to see what it is that Krishna desires, and then willing to work for it, they actually get the most benefit out of the holy name. Because for them, that is the way of becoming fearless, which is we see here. That is the akoto bhayam, the path of becoming free from doubt and becoming free from fear, is this willingness to embrace Krishna's desire and to take it seriously and gradually always keep investing in it and building it. And then our chanting of the holy name becomes successful, because as Prabhupada says, that the moment as the desire of Krishna then takes over our whole internal world, then we become immune. And then we also become satisfied, because it is then that spiritual life is exciting and not just a eternal battle against somehow trying to not be so absorbed in ourselves. Okay, those were a few thoughts on this verse, which is a very, very nice verse to memorize. Very important verse. And again, to understand why is he speaking this, because Sukadeva Goswami was speaking to all these people. In the audience there were all three of these kinds of people. And he was telling all of them, okay, but whatever it is that you want, just chant the holy name of the Lord and you'll be able to get it. But still understanding that the devotee gets the most out of it. Okay, let us hear if there are any questions or any comments on anything that has been said today. You can begin.
Thank you for this class. So, I'm trying to understand how can it be that you're supposed to be satisfied, but you have to kind of desire more. You know, like always you feel, like Prabhupada, for example, for example, that he was satisfied, he was really happy.
Yeah.
But he always asked for more. How can we implement that in practical level? Because if you do something and then someone just tells you, oh, yeah, we can do it better, like the way this person say it can be, whether he or she is satisfied or being good or not. Do you understand? Like,
Yes, yes. It's a little bit of a... Yeah, well... that apparent contradiction between satisfaction and desire for improvement, it becomes lessened the more we really do it for the reason of satisfying the spiritual master and Krishna. Because then we can see that both are possible. Because the spiritual master is very much pleased by whatever we have done, but at the same time he desires more. And therefore in that way, whatever we have done brings us satisfaction, because the spiritual master gracefully accepts it. But at the same time, we understand that his desire is still ever increasing, because that is the nature of desire, that it never stops. Prabhupada says in one purport that because Krishna is infinite, we understand also that his desire is infinite. So therefore, fascinating to think that Krishna's desire, it's ironic how Krishna, he is fully satisfied, but at the same time, his desire is also infinite, it will never stop. So in this way, there is a little bit of a paradox, but it means then that we have to truly start trying to just do it for Krishna's pleasure. And when we truly try to do it for Krishna's pleasure, and we also increase our understanding of that we are very, you see, in the beginning, it can cause also anxiety as we start to make this adjustment to thinking that it's about pleasing Krishna, because then we feel that again now our happiness is out of our control, because now it causes all this anxiety and thinking, oh, I should be doing this, I should be doing that, and then we beat ourselves up. But then again, that is because we do not fully understand Krishna's benevolent nature. We do not understand that it is to please Krishna is not that difficult. It is not such a horrendous, difficult thing. He is pleased simply by the effort. So therefore, there is still no reason for fear. There is no reason for anxiety in the execution of our devotional service, because it doesn't really depend on how it happens. Just like we see in book distribution, it does not actually depend on how much your score is. It really doesn't matter. There's a nice letter where Prabhupada says everybody in the temple should just do something, and he says if there's people who are not to have anything to do, they should just go out and book distribution. And then the temple person says, yes, but these people, they suck. They can't do it, they can't really do anything. So if they go out, what's the point? Prabhupada said, no, but it doesn't matter. He says even if they don't distribute a single book, it doesn't matter, because it is the attempt that pleases Krishna. So therefore Krishna consciousness is interesting, because in the one side it is demanding, because it is always requiring from us to always be desiring and always working for Krishna's pleasure. But at the same time, it is actually very undemanding, Because it is not about how exactly, what the result is doesn't really matter. It's about the endeavor that pleases Krishna. So in that way, both things are nice. So we are satisfied simply by making an attempt. We know that everything will be a sincere attempt, then we are able to do both. We are satisfied by whatever we have offered, and at the same time, we are always seeking to improve. It's always better service. That is the motto that we try to abide by. But to the extent that our service is motivated still by the desire to impress other people, or the desire to live up to expectations we have of ourselves, then to that extent we will still be covered by fear, and we will still be covered by dissatisfaction. Because then again, our satisfaction will then be rooted in a specific, then we want something specific out of it. We want to be the best. I want to be the best devotee. And therefore, when I become the best, then I am satisfied. So therefore, this is because it is mixed by other motivations, therefore we will still be dissatisfied. But that's to be understood, because it means then that is materialism. So one is still invested in it. So we see, for example, many devotees, interesting how specifically you have certain devotees who have great, extraordinary willpower. So people that are used to having very strong willpower to get what they want in this world. And then they can funnel that into Krishna consciousness. It's amazing. They can come there, and then they can do that also. Amazingly determined minds. They can just get what they want, and they go for it. Boom, boom, boom. And then we see. But then what's interesting with these people, at a certain point, that also breaks. Their health breaks, or you just become old. You can't do it anymore. So it's set up in that way that at a certain point you will have to abandon your conception that you have of yourself. Like once my Guru Maharaj told the story, they went to the beach, and because he is obviously from the Netherlands, and he is a very good swimmer, like very good. He could swim very, very far, and he always had boats. So he was always on the ocean. He was a water person also. So boats and sailing and swimming. So once, this was after he'd been a sannyasi maybe for 10 or 12 years, somehow the devotees convinced him that they should go to the beach. And it's fine, Prabhupada also went to the ocean. He would go sometimes with his disciples to the ocean and swim. It was very good. And so then once he went there, and then there were these lifeguards on duty, and then when he was going in, he had a gamsha, and he was going into the ocean, then one of the lifeguards, they had that mega speaker, and they said, "Hey, old man in the pink dress," he says, "are you sure you can swim?" And then for a moment he was so offended, because he was thinking, obviously I can swim, what do you mean? Don't this good person. But then he became a little sober, he was thinking, well, actually, I'm very old now, and I haven't swam in many, many years. I haven't swum in the ocean, and I had all my health difficulties, been in the hospital so many times. So then I was thinking, well, I'm not sure. Maybe I can. Maybe I should be a little careful when I go into the ocean now, because I'm an old man. I forgot. So in that way, we see that Krishna consciousness also. We have this whole idea of ourselves, but even at a certain point, that will also disappear. And it's interesting then that also helps us to adjust, to again realize, well, actually in the pursuit of my devotional service, I'm not doing this really to live up to some kind of ideal I have of myself, which usually we also think it comes from other people. We think that other people expect us to be in a certain way, and then we try to live up to that ideal, and then we funnel that also in Krishna consciousness. And it's not bad, because it helps us to stay motivated, and it helps us keep coming to Mangal Arati, because we think that, yes, if I don't come to Mangal Arati, then everybody will think I'm a bad devotee. Oh, what a horrible idea. And then we keep coming, because out of that fear of that. But at a certain point, the adjustment has to be made, where we see, actually I do all these things for Krishna's pleasure. And then we immediately relax. Why is that? Because the nice thing with Krishna, there's many nice things with Krishna, but the one nice thing with Krishna is that he knows everything. Actually knows everything. So he knows what we can do and what we can't do. He also knows if we are sincere or not. He knows if we are trying our best or not. He knows. He actually knows. So what is the difficulty? What is the fear? So no need to fear. There's no chance of misunderstanding from Krishna's perspective. And then it differs. So in that pursuit of devotional service, We have to do that. We have to start making that shift to just thinking, well, if I really do it for Krishna's pleasure, still it will be fine. Sometimes we fear that then our motivation or willpower will not be so strong. No, not at all. The willpower becomes much stronger as we clearly understand what it is that Krishna wants from us. So that's how it goes. And that is why it's a gradual process of purification. And the desire still stays the same. We still do all the same things, but we do it out of a more pure motivation. But and therefore we see the essential thing is to have a spiritual master, because the spiritual master is what makes Krishna's desires concrete. He is the one that ultimately decides what is pleasing to him and what is not. And therefore by listening to the spiritual master's mood really and trying to imbibe that, then we start to see, well, what is it that is wanted. And then also we adjust our own conceptions of how much we should renounce and how much we should enjoy according to the desires of the spiritual master. Like I remember, whatever, so many things we can do. In the beginning you can come in and then one can be so attached, for example, sometimes people become attached to certain austerities that they think that they have to perform. But then at a certain point we realize actually the spiritual master decides, what I should be doing. So there's a story of one disciple of Prabhupada. He moved to somewhere in India, and he was chanting so many rounds a day, 108 rounds a day, just living very austerely. And then the people came and they told Prabhupada, "Oh, Prabhupada, this person is doing so and so." Prabhupada wasn't impressed. And then continual reports would be coming of this devotee who was living more and more austerely and chanting more and more rounds. And then one day, one devotee came and he said to Prabhupada, he said, "Oh Prabhupada, this devotee, he is now going to live in a tree. He's moving in and away from the devotees because he doesn't want to be disturbed." And then Prabhupada says, just see. He doesn't want. He says, useless. He's still doing it because he's doing what he wants. So, therefore we see that our renunciation and our whatever it is that we're doing in our life, we have to also become peaceful. If the spiritual master says it's okay, then it doesn't be okay. If he says it's fine, it is fine. If he says that this is what I desire of you, this is what I expect of you, and this is what you should do, then why do you then adjust your own expectations, thinking that I should become like this and this? Where's that coming from? So we have to also abandon these other ideas that we might have about what we think we are supposed to do, and just fully focus on the spiritual master's desire. The spiritual master says that this is enough, then that's enough. And if he says if this is good, then that is good. And in that way, it becomes, so the things are we see that it is subtle. It is subtle things that become worked out over a long period of time. Because it takes a little while to become aware really of our own motivations. It's very difficult actually for us to be aware of our own motivations. Because we aren't so much. It is very, it's mixed with so many different things. But in the process of executing devotional service, Krishna gradually, he reveals to us. And we start to learn more and more of ourselves in that way. And then we can make these adjustments. Okay. 9 o'clock. Any questions, Kanti?
I think you just answered it.
Okay, cool. Grantaras Śhrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki, Śrīla Prabhupada ki, Harinam Sankirtan Yagya ki.